So I'm from the Midwest in the United States. Like a lot of the students, they feel the same way when they're not in a big city in China. Always had a dream to actually go to Parsons. So at the time, Parsons was like the best design school that you could go to. It was known world over, and so worked super hard in high school. My grandmother helped me figure out what classes that were available at the time to take, to kind of gain my skills, and I started sewing really young. So I totally advise students, you know, if you can start sewing, start making, really, really important to start early. I applied to Parsons, and I didn't get in the first time. So the second time, I went to the University of Minnesota, then applied again, and they gave me a scholarship to come to New York and test me out. So I know that feeling about trying to get into a school and basically not achieving goals in the beginning. And so went to Parsons, had an incredible experience, great faculty, but I still really wanted to experience Europe. My sensibility was more creative, I think, than 7th Avenue. One-way ticket, $400, paid my tuition, and went to Paris and started just to meet up with people that were referred to me by the chair at Parsons. Literally not knowing anybody, babysitting when I got there from the American Church, posted, announcements, and basically stayed long enough to show my portfolio, and ended up with Christian Dior, with Madame de Mortimer at Christian Dior, and she was amazing. She challenged me quite a bit. We would work with copier paper and basically be pumping out these sketches like, oh my gosh, maybe at different times you'd do maybe 100 in a day. Yeah. And you just would do different versions of them. So literally, like, we would sketch in Paris all day long and put together ideas, and it would be fun because a lot of us would meet up in a cafe, and we'd keep the ones that weren't, taken by whoever we were designing for, and basically, show each other at a cafe after work, or, and talk about what we had done that day. So it really, is amazing in terms of, the amount of work and the amount of creative work we were doing to present to whoever we were working with, and have them just choose sketches and kind of
so you essentially present them with a pile, and then we'll just pick the ones they liked. So you were just like, you had a chunk of copier paper, and basically that's what you were doing. I mean, this is us working in the studio with the Karen Elson, who was a big model at the time. We got to work with Lesage, who does. Or at the same time, I got asked to teach at Parsons, which I was helping a professor that was coming over to start the Parsons Paris program at the time. So we're going back to the late 80s. That's how I started teaching. So I helped put together that sophomore program, would run in and teach a sophomore design class, then a junior design class over the years that I was in Paris. And it really was something that I enjoyed so much, giving back, giving internships to students. And at the same time, I was actually approached by a Chinese investor to start my own brand. So I ended up doing that for a short time. Now, the stock market crashed back then. The financial markets crashed. Now we're in a financial situation right now. And he was unable to keep financing me, but it gave me a sense of, what do I want to be as a brand? I was at a show showing my clothes and met Olivier Lapidus, the son of Ted Lapidus. So if you look at historical fashion, his father was one of the most famous 1960s, 70s, 80s designers, along with Pierre Cardin. So Olivier was famous because of his father. He had a collection in Japan. And I said, well, I'll keep doing my own thing. I'll fund my own collection, and I'll do this collection with him. Long story short, he got huge financing from a woman who was from Chanel. And we had huge funding and the best models, and really like the opportunity for me to run this whole atelier. That was a time when I really got to work, in a brand, rebranding or like branding somebody that was known from a famous father, and focusing on an atelier with about 20 people in it, and getting to know different aspects of high quality haute couture pret-à-porter de luxe. So I ended up in Paris for 5 years, and I was kind of itchy to start my own thing again after the experience I had in Paris. A friend of mine asked me to come visit in California. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. And lived there for 4 years, started a company, started selling to Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom's, about 100 specialty stores, and really realized that I needed to go back to New York because New York was really where it was at. When I came back to New York, I started teaching at Parsons. One class, negotiated that one class into a full-time position. And the first thing I pretty much hopped into was working in luxury menswear for a very old brand called Hickey Freeman. And I love the aspect of the rebranding. And I love now teaching in the master's program at Parsons, and also with the students that are looking at marketing, branding, and fashion, because I think there's so much to be done with it, with the idea of expanding brands and relooking at older brands and younger demographics. After Hickey Freeman, I wanted to work with women's wear again. So I was at Liz Lang, which I don't know if anybody knows Liz Lang, but she's an incredible businesswoman that had the idea that, pregnant women don't need to look terrible, and they need to fit into business, into fashion, and why couldn't they be fashionable? After that, I was at Liz Claiborne for a very long time. What was interesting about that was looking at big business. And at the time, I believe it was about $250,000 worth of a business at the mass level, and we grew it to close to $1 billion by expanding different categories.
Wow.
So it was really great building a team, looking at the American consumer, understanding what we could do with factories in China. That it was amazing, the partnerships that we had. Then after that, I decided I really want to do my own thing, like completely my own thing. I just want to consult. I want to teach. I started working with ACG, and I felt like I could reach more of a creative market in terms of students. Just helping students over the years has been really fun for me, and part of the professional aspect that I've been doing is consulting for businesses on the branding level, looking at different needs in business on design and manufacturing and the partnership that's needed for that.
One thing I really noticed is that although you made it seem as if you moved from one thing to another and it was just smooth sailing, but I really felt like there's a lot of courage involved moving from Minnesota to New York City, two completely different places, and you were on your own, and going to Paris and then taking on these new positions that you might have not taken before, moving from design to branding. Hopping into the unknown is not something that everybody is willing or have the courage to do. So what do you think motivated you?
I think that one, for some reason, I have no fear. I feel like I can always do something else, and I think having that is a good thing. Of course, I made it sound simple of, the path that I had, but it was really hard work, and it was not being afraid to break through culture, break through boundaries. The language barrier with the French, that was huge. I understand what that is to go to a place and really not be able to speak the language, and kind of, really come back to yourself and figure out what it is that you want to do. Do I really want to take this risk? Big rewards when you take risks. There's huge rewards. So you can always take a step backwards and find yourself in another space, a safer space. But I like challenging myself. I love learning. I love meeting new people. So I just enjoy it. I guess people ask me like, you're a little crazy. How did you ever do that? But I think looking back at it, I'm so glad I did it.
I think you brought up a really important point, which is that sometimes when you take a leap of faith and then you find out that nothing actually happens, even if you fail or make a mistake, the potential reward is actually way higher than a potential failure that you might have, which really isn't consequential.
Exactly.
To the extent of our imagination. So
exactly, and that's what I tell my Chinese students, my international students. You guys, listen, I was there, and I actually wasn't in school and couldn't practice. And you guys are in school. Get to know other students.
Yeah.
Break apart from your groups of feeling safe. Go and practice your English. That's what you're here for. Just experience being here in New York and have fun with it. Everything, if you work hard and if you take some chances, it's so good for you to do that. You can always come back to your comfort zone.
And would you say there was a moment that you knew that you wanted to go into fashion and knew you wanted to do design?
So yeah, I was in middle school, and my mom was very fashionable. She was so cool, and for Minnesota, she was we'd go to the stores and everybody would be looking at her. And so I kind of didn't understand that when I was a little kid. But as I got older, I realized she had a lot of style. She didn't care what anybody thought about how she looked. Her expression with her fashion was part of who she was. And I really admired that. She also told me, don't let the clothing wear you. You wear the clothing. In a way, I've had this kind of creative, conceptual aspect of thinking about fashion, but also coming to a point where real people need clothes and we need to move and the body needs to move. So I started making clothes for my ski coach. He liked what I was making for myself, and I made this powder jacket. He's like, oh my gosh, will you make one for me? Now, his wife was my art teacher.
Wow.
So I made this for him, and it was so great to see, an idea, make something, and have somebody want it.
Right.
And I think that for me was the beginning of seeing how I could use my skills as a creative student, as a creative person, to actually make people feel good about themselves, solve problems, functional. A ski jacket, we needed pockets, we needed warmth, we needed things, to really think about in terms of design. And it was fun. It was fun to, kind of think about something and see it come to 3D and be wearable, and somebody thanking you for it, and actually paid me. He actually paid me for it. So I think that was the thing that motivated me early on. And also I just was making clothes and wearing them, making clothes and wearing them, and just experimenting with what I wanted. And then different people, I'd make prom dresses for my friends, different things for, dance performances. It was just something that I felt like I could do and do well.
That does sound like a lot of fun as well, making dresses for all your friends.
Exactly. I was like, oh, you're sure you want me to make that? Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that your mom was an inspiration, and do you see her in you now?
She's such a different personality than I am, but in a sense, she made me, and this is what I think, to your point before, she said to me, there are 4 kids, you're the oldest, you want to go to New York, you figure it out. So I had to figure it out. It wasn't like somebody's like, oh, here's the money for your tuition, here's a plane ticket. I had to figure that all out. Right. Of course, she was supportive, but she didn't have the means to help me. So I just had to hustle.
Yeah, well, you're the pioneer of the family.
So I think it's good, even if you have tuition paid for you, even if you've got a plane ticket for yourself, you really have to challenge yourself on how can I work hard to make this happen? How can I gain the skills and get, what I need out of the schools, to help me basically get to where I want to get to.
Yeah. When you did go to Parsons, what did you find that was something that was very memorable that really shaped your education and your career in the future?
I think for Parsons, the level of instruction was amazing. So the reputation of the school was it was Harvard of fashion when I went. It's expanded. There's so much that's offered in so many different areas. I told you now I'm teaching in the master's program. I went back to school and got my master's, and there's just so much to be offered there that at the time when I went, the best of the best were teaching. We had Calvin Klein, Donna Karan, we had Perry Ellis, we had all these famous designers coming in and working with us as students. I think there were only 40 of us in that graduating class.
Small.
It was very small and elite. If you didn't show up 3 times, you got kicked out.
Oh, no.
I mean, it really was difficult to stay in. So when you made it and you graduated from Parsons, that you really accomplished something.
Yeah.
But yeah, the professors, I mean, I ended up coming back after Paris and teaching with people that had taught me.
No way.
Yes, and because I was 21, I just graduated when they asked me to help out with the program in Paris. It was really exciting to come back and actually see and work with people that I admired so much.
Now, given what you just described with 40 students and then the intensity of the program, it really did sound more like a graduate program almost for an undergraduate program.
It was intense. It was intense. We had so much more work. I tell my students, you guys, you can do your work. I need to do this. And they're like, no way. So yeah, it was a little bit more rigorous, but I think there's more of a scope. We've got digital, Clo 3D, Style 3D. There's all of these layers, and there's different areas of fashion now. So the specialization that you can do within Parsons is amazing.
It is challenging for students nowadays because they are presented with so many options, and not just the fields of study that you can go into, the types of career that you can go into following a degree from that field, and then also the tools that you can make use of in order to get there.
Right.
And do you have any advice for them in terms of the decision-making process? Because I struggle with it too.
Yes, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. I think so. What I like to ask each student when I first meet them is a little bit about themselves, and also kind of understand which designers they like. And the funny thing is, they all love the European designers, but they're in New York. I'm like, you guys pick Parsons. So who in New York do you want to experience, possibly intern for? Like, let's just broaden this up and not be so fixated on these brands that really market all the time, the Dior, the Balenciaga. Know fashion. Really figure out what it is that you love about fashion. And we're at a point in time in this world where we have to think a little bit outside ourselves in terms of sustainability, in terms of accepting others, inclusivity. How are we, looking at fashion? And there, has been in the past Parsons graduates, designers of the year that have looked at fashion on how to design better for people that are wheelchair bound, that have handicaps and disabilities. The students that are preparing their portfolios, how are we going to make fashion better? How are we going to make people's lives better? And where's the fun? Where's the fun? Where do you really look at fashion and love the aesthetic? And how can we build that into personal branding for yourself, as well as branding and the connection to other designers that exist?
I was thinking about how, with a lot of the work being done digitally now, which is great and fine, but it is very special to have a physical copy of all of your work and being able to.
I mean, I push the students, if they can, to do some physical and to create the most important thing. And I also tell the ACG students, and I give them examples, I show them examples of journal work. So the design journal and working with the journal with real fabrics in there.
Right.
They'll digitize them, scan them for another presentation, but really having this quick sketching with pencil and concepts and evolution of design and really showing the process. They get hired on the design journal because that's the inside thinking of how they work.
Yeah.
So they can't dismiss handwork altogether. And then they can digitize and perfect the portfolio aspect of it. But it's really important to have that hands-on. I don't think that'll ever go away.
Yeah, drawing is very special in that way, in that it's not just a means to an end. You do learn a lot from the process of drawing.
Exactly.
So that's definitely very important. I hope it doesn't. I think digital tools are very great, and then but they should go hand in hand.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. When you started working on your own label and your own collection, what was that process like? Because you have so much experience working with these, big name fashion houses and luxury wear, fast fashion, menswear, women's wear. So how do you even locate? I guess what are the set of questions that you were asking yourself when you were approaching your own collection?
That's a good question, because even somebody applying, somebody in school, and somebody dreaming about their own brand, they need to ask themselves these questions.
Yeah.
So the focus is, what do you love to do? Who is your customer? How do you want to approach the design process? And where do you want to sell? So there's all these questions that you have to ask yourself. And I tell my students, listen, if I were going to start a brand today, it would be probably 2 or 3 months of research. Research on who do I want to connect with on a consumer level. So when I started my brand at the first time in Paris, I really looked at, where do my talents lie? What do I want to say about fashion? And at the time, I was in Paris, so I had a Parisian customer, possibly a global customer, because people were coming to a big city to buy. And I looked at my illustration skills. Well, why don't I put together print pattern development, really look at my illustration in terms of fabric. So that's what I did at that point, because I felt like I could be a little bit more creative for that market. When I got to California, I had to again ask myself, where am I? Who's the customer? It's the LA Mart. I found a rep there. Color, ease of living, we're not all dressed up every day. It's completely different than New York, Paris, or even the Midwest.
Yeah.
So I had to relook at where I was, where I was starting. And as I expanded my market, then I really focused on, I want to design for women that are like me. I want to design for women that get up in the morning, they're going, when I moved to New York, they're working, they're wanting to be comfortable from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. The end of the day could be going out to dinner, could be speaking in front of an audience, could be anything in terms of, this person's busy lifestyle, because most people that are going to wear suits or more structured and feminine pieces that are combined together are probably going to end up, working. So it was really important for me to make women feel comfortable, empowered, use European fabrics, work in the ability to kind of transform yourself from the day to the evening, take a jacket off, have a beautiful blouse or top on. So, it really is about the consumer and figuring out what that customer wants. But then on a very personal level, figuring out what colors, what fabrics, what do I love the most about design.
Right. It's really beautiful to hear that it's all about, at the end of the day, about connecting with people and also at the same time and not in conflict whatsoever, discovering yourself and what your sensibilities are, and then tapping to that while you are taking your people into consideration. Do you look back at your older work and then find that they are very refreshing, or how do you feel about them looking back?
I had to do a project for an interview with FIT, and I had to present myself as a designer and as a professional to the faculty. And I did some ethnographic research and went back to my mom. I go, she's got a lot of my clothing, and I said to her, am I still the same as I was, as a kid, as a designer, and now? And she's like, yes, you are the same. My focus was also making quality clothes that were collectible. So, trying to figure out, I'm not trendy, I'm more classic, but I like working with shape. And I like working with what women feel good in.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the class that you were teaching with ACG.
So yeah, I love it because either it is focused on design or it is focused on branding and marketing and two different areas of getting into persons. So I love doing it. I think it's 4 or 5 years that I've been connected with ACG. and I've met great people along the way. The students are super hardworking, very focused. I connect with them on WeChat. They find me when they finally get here. I think I was telling you that, I just met with a student, and it was just so much fun to meet in person after being so far away. And yeah, and when I was meeting with her, I'm like, all right, what professors do you have? What do you think about the classes? What is your focus? Like a re-look at what it is to finally get here, and then figure out that strategy at school. I think that's a big part of what, students need as well.
Right. It's so great that the students get to meet you in person and continue to receive feedback and advice from you as they're going into undergrad. And the student you met up was accepted into FIT, so she'll be going there.
Yes.
Do you have any other advice that you can think of for Chinese students specifically who are intending to come to the U.S. to study fashion?
Learn about American designers, meeting American students, and finding out new things about themselves as an international student coming into another culture.
Yes.
I love going to other cultures and just like letting things, happen and meet people and learn of customs and cultures and the way things are done. So I think just being more open and taking a little bit of risk, and asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask your professors questions, and really experience everything you can experience.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, one thing I learned from the pandemic is that anything can change right away, right? So we never know how long we get to stay in one place. And so if you have the opportunity to experience something different, then really take advantage of all of it, right? And I think a lot of students, they think about the school a lot, like the Parsons, FIT, Pratt, the New York schools, and as you mentioned, don't forget the city and don't forget the country, and then think about what are the other ways that you can really learn from being in a different culture, and the way that you were completely open when you went to Paris, and then that's why all the opportunities. That's one of the reasons why you're very talented. I think it's very apparent, but being very open is also one reason why opportunities do come to you.
Right.
So. It's still, I still, it's mind-baffling that you just went to Paris like on your own. And
The funny story is I was mid-flight. I had my little sewing machine. I have it still, this little Singer, this black Singer. My great aunt gave me my portfolio under the seat. And this guy was like kind of a dude. He's like, hey, what are you going to do in Paris? And I was like, I'm going to be a fashion designer. And he was like, oh, so do you know people? Do you have a job? I'm like, no. Do you speak French? I'm like, no. He goes, whoa, you're really brave. And mid-Atlantic, I was like, I'm insane. What am I doing? But, I got there. And he was like making me really nervous, but it worked out.
Yeah, absolutely, it worked out.
Went to Paris without like a plan or a job. You just went. That's so cool.
I just went, and my mom was like, "All right," and my friends were like, "Really?" And Calvin Klein, I met with Calvin Klein, and he had been working with us at school. He looked at me. He goes, "Listen, you can have a job when you come back, but before you get the dog, the boyfriend, the apartment." You need to go. And you can always come back. You can always call me. You can call whoever. You're very talented, whatever. And I never forgot that. And he almost gave me like the push, like, I got to do this first. I can always come back. I have all my contacts here. I'm part of an elite group at Parsons that graduated from the program. I can always come back.
Yeah. It is good that there is kind of like a safety net in one sense. But then, it does take something else to actually make that leap. And then you stay in Paris for 5 years. Yeah. And a lot happened those 5 years.
A lot happened. Yeah. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about living in another culture, appreciating another culture, trying to speak French, really kind of getting into the whole aspect of being there and living there.
Yeah. That's very cool. Very inspiring.